All right, we're back again. James Pack here, concept artist, instructor, and today we've got this image here that we're working on, and it's a sci-fi city. I did a quick tutorial on this, but here's a full breakdown on what's going on. All right, so let's jump into it. Let's go. All right, as we're starting off a new canvas, and I'm just gonna get my references in order. So I'm opening up my photo reference folder, and let me just search for a few materials that I know I'll be needing. And some of it is some basic hard surface reference, industrial reference, things like that. All right, so as we jump into this, just gonna get a really quick composition going. This exercise that I'm doing right now, this painting, is more about how to design a building using some photo bashing and photo layering and painting techniques. So not a whole lot of composition focus right now, just something super simple, and yeah, just trying to go from there. So working on a basic silhouette, it's a building, and from here I'm going to be importing in some silhouettes. Now, I love working in silhouettes. If you've ever seen any of my other tutorials, same thing. Love utilizing high fidelity silhouettes. So I'm going to be utilizing some of those references here. Those references are going to be key. And here we go. So playing around with some of these shapes, and you can see these shapes are just all these different, like hard surface, maybe military / industrial silhouettes. I'll go over a whole other thing about how to get those silhouettes and how to utilize those in a painting like this. But here I go, and I'm just adding in detail as I go along the edge of the shape. Now, one thing that I have in mind whenever I'm working on this silhouette pass is for me to think about one basic design theory, which is the contrast of simple versus complex. Okay, simple versus complex. It's not a huge, it's not a very advanced thing. It's something that we all learn kind of early on in basic design, but that's something that I pay attention to right here. So all I'm trying to do is balance maybe like a 1/3 ratio of really small tiny details and a 2/3 ratio of simple shapes, right? So 1/3, 2/3, again, another kind of design theory that maybe you guys are really familiar with. If not, no problem, you can learn it here, you know? But you can see an application. Now, as I'm doing this, I'm more basing a lot of this design decision making based on gut, based on, I'm looking at it, it's an initial reaction. Do I like how it looks? Should I stretch it? Should I pull it? Should I, do all these different things to make the photo or the silhouettes work differently? And if I like where it's going, I kind of try to commit to it. And what's important to do, or what's important about committing, is that you just eventually develop something that's like a sense of decision making. And decision making is always really tough. It's something that takes kind of years of practice. But I like to utilize it in my personal work because it's a bit more, forgiving, and I wouldn't do it on client work. But I do it on my own stuff and just make sure I'm getting there. So back to the silhouettes. Just gonna be looking at some of the edges here, just looking at refined edge shapes. So the whole goal is to basically, again, get photorealistic details all along the perimeter. Again, controlling the contrast level, simple versus complex. On a side note, a lot of the things that I design are based on very simple design theories like that, like simple versus complex, like straight versus curves, soft edge versus hard edge, light versus dark, things like that, warm versus cool. So, if we can, I don't know, hopefully just pay attention to that, maybe it'll help out. Alrighty, here we go. So now I'm getting content with the shape of the building, like where it's going. So my first initial passes right now is to do the sky. Now the sky is going to be super important. It's what I like to say is it dictates the whole piece in terms of lighting, tone, kind of the value structure. I mean, obviously there's some ways to be creative within that space, but it's a big dictator. Like it really establishes a lot of the direction of where you're going. So select wisely, you know. And I like to make sure that I have a different array of skies, such as, you know, God ray cloudy, you know, things like that. Okay, blue sky afternoon, you know, sunset. All right, right here is something that I want to show you guys. These are some asset sheets. These asset sheets are sheets that I like to put together that have some photo in there that are more like, not like photo reference of what design looks like, but these are photo references that I can use as photo textures. You know, it's a lot different. So I'm gonna start getting this going, guys. Let's jump into it. So first things first is, as I work on the laying some photo in here, it's really important that I just wallpaper everything. You know, and wallpaper everything. I'm doing this really simple kind of a trick that's just duplicating the photo in a mirror kind of look, and then stretching it out. You know, really stretching and pulling it in perspective, right? And notice the vanishing point, the rhythm of the lines are going towards the building, right? So there is a little bit of, I guess, planning here, but I'm just using these shapes from the photos to act as a ground. I'm also going to be utilizing the same shapes or the same photos to be doing the building. So it's a very versatile, you know, thing here, and you can utilize your photo reference in many different ways, whether it's a ground, a building, a car, a spaceship, as long as you're pretty creative with it. All right, apologize for the really small zoom out here. I have a tendency to paint really small, sometimes just like a postcard size. And it's just to get the initial values, initial rhythms in place, you know, zooming out kind of thing. All right, so the ground's looking okay. I think we're gonna start moving forward to the building now. A little bit of masking, just kind of clean up some of the edges of the photos that are interacting with each other. Now, I always say that photos, you know, it's a pretty daunting element to work with if you want to start painting with photos, kind of like how I'm doing. But one thing I need you to know is eventually photos become just like any other tool. Like, you will get very confident with it. You can paint over it very confidently, or just, you know, make these drastic changes. So yeah, hopefully this is like a demo or a tutorial that kind of shows you a little bit about the process that I like to use for that. Alright, so notice in here I'm also working on another idea of contrast. That is positive and negative shapes. So the building itself is a big you know, object, but on the surface are going to be recesses, you know, or these darker parts of the building that push inwards, right? And those would be the negative shapes. The positive shapes would be more of the building surface that you see that's getting hit by light. So what I'm trying to design here, after I've done the silhouette, which is simple versus complex, is I want to start putting these shapes, these negative shapes, around the interior of the silhouette to make a interesting design, you know? So let's go ahead and see how that works out over here. Right, so we're going to be just kind of situating it in. And one thing is, I'm keeping in mind perspective. You know, perspective is going to be one of those dead giveaways. If it's wrong, people can notice. You know, I always say my non-art buddies, my non-art friends or family members can see when perspective is wrong. You know, it's one of those things that people see every day. They won't know why it looks wrong or like how to fix it, but they just know it looks wrong. And that's not what we want. That would be, you know, not being immersive into the concept. It's actually taking people out of the concept. All right, now I'm using one of the key layer settings that I like to use. It's called darken layer. A darken layer, as you can see, it picks up the darker accents that are in the photo. Not the lighter accents, but the darker accents. Now, because I'm working on negative shapes or recesses, I'm gonna start putting in those darker recesses. After I have that, I'm gonna work on the opposite. Lighten layer. Let's start to pump up some texture and you know, sense of materials on the positive side. And what's great about lighten layer is just this portion right here. As you can see, I can repeatedly tile the same photo on top of itself without it building value higher. It's a great layer setting, lighten layer. Screen doesn't do that. Screen builds on top, overlay builds on top, but lighten layer. One of those things that kind of helps with just controlling and, you know, utilizing photo the way you want. And so because I'm using photos, positive, negative shapes, that's basically all I'm trying to do right now. Is design the positive shapes, reinforce them with a couple of darks, maybe some shadow accents, and I'm just trying to create visual interest. Big, medium, small is definitely something that I'm keeping in mind, as well as, you know, a sense of functionality, and I take that word lightly. You know, I'm not trying to design a building that's like a transformer, or that it moves, or, you know, has a specific function that you should tell immediately. But I want the audience to understand that it's a building that might have a function in, like, it being like looking like a factory, or looking like a industrial, you know, power plant or something like that. You know, so some of that language is important for me. Alright, just working on some outer silhouette shapes. So as you can see, it's not always a process where as I keep progressing, I don't take a step back and try to change some of the previous steps. It is a very organic process. So as I progress forward, you can see I design the silhouette, then I go to the interior. When I see the interior shapes do something, it makes me realize that the exterior silhouette should also have a little bit of that flavor, you know? So then I go out, find that layer, and find where I can put those additional marks. Everything, again, reinforcing each other. I love design basics. One design basic is using the design fundamentals, the core shapes, the primitives, square, circle, triangles. So I have a lot of squares here, a couple of triangles you can see with the right, you know, the diagonal angles. So I want to put in these circular shapes. I don't know what they are. Maybe like these large, who knows. But whatever the case is, I just want to make, again, visual interest, you know? I just want to make it look visually interesting. Big, medium, small, or, you know, contrast, some scale, repeating shapes. I'm just moving them around. I'm just making it feel like there's some scale happening, some repetition. All right, zooming out just to take a look, see how we're going. Now, important step over here, copy merge. Well, actually, I'm grabbing the outer silhouette and I'm shifted it over just a little bit so that I can basically paint in some negative shapes utilizing the already photorealistic detail. You know, so instead of having to like hand paint these negative shapes that I'm guessing what they would look like, I could just kind of, you know, take them from some photo selection. All right, now select the outer silhouette, copy merge, paint, or copy merge and paste into a new canvas. Now I have basically a front building texture that I can utilize to completely texture the other side of the building. I'm not gonna do it one by one, you know, piece by piece like I did the other side, the first side, but I'm gonna do it in a way where hopefully it creates a little bit more efficiency, but I have to make sure that it doesn't look too repeated, you know? So again, lighten layer, moving around some of the shapes, fill in the darks so that now the positive shapes, the texture on the building surface, it has a different design. You know, I don't do a whole lot of 3D, but this is very similar to a lot of process in 3D where you can do, you know, like bricks. You move around bricks and you move around brick textures and size and scale of stones and things like that. You know, very similar mindset. Now down at the bottom is where, you know, I like to, you know, I'm thinking that most of the smaller shapes could probably live around there. So I just want to get a little bit more complexity down there. Still figuring it out. And again, using the paintbrush, the magic wand, right? Not the magic wand tool in Photoshop, but the actual, like, you know, the paintbrush is like a magic wand in which it can sort of create all the fixes that you need to get all of the photos that work together. You know, if that makes sense. You know, I'm able to paint in some of the consistency. You know, get those little detail marks to really make sense. All right, now let's look around here. Need some detail noise. All right, so this is what I like to do. Whenever there's a sense of information that I need to have it look like it's a lot of detail, I just like to put a lot of noise in there. And it's really about controlling the amount of information that you see. So in those darker recesses, it's still dark, but we might see little hints of railing and other platforms and things of that nature in that space. So hopefully we can maybe capture some of that with some of that practice too. As I'm working again on the piece, I'm just thinking about, maybe because I was working on the area of you know, smaller details down below, I'm thinking about some of the details that are up at the top part of the silhouette. Kind of like that antenna. Kind of gives it like a human scale. Again, not really sure what it is, but it's just visual appeal. And a lot of times in concept design, visual appeal is what gets the conversation started. And then writers and story people and other designers would get into a room and we just think about, well, what can that be? It's interesting. It already sparks people's interest. So what can it be? So it's almost like you reverse engineer sometimes. Maybe you guys have seen that in like behind the scenes of like any movies. George Lucas is at the time. Okay. Alrighty here. So just reinforcing. I think I'm just kind of noodling a little bit right now, just to kind of get my senses going. You know, sometimes during a painting, it's very fluid, and you already know the next step. And then sometimes you get as far as you can. You're like, well, I don't know what to do right now. Well, just, you know, sometimes you can just take a step back and figure it out. You know, it doesn't always need to be this constant motion of creation. You know, it's kind of like there's rhythms to it, I guess. That's all I could say about that. But yeah, let me know, guys, if guys and girls, if there's a question or anything that I'm kind of missing, let me know. You know, send me a comment or a question somewhere, and let me see if I can address or at least get some going in the next episodes, you know, in the next tutorials. Again, moving around the same texture and trying to really figure out how to make it just feel and read correctly. This is a big building. What do we mean by feel correctly? Feel and, you know, feel right is that it has to have the right scale. You know, there are things, there's buildings that are huge, that are really far away, that have really dissipated senses of details and inner information, but there's still a lot of intricacy that your eye picks up, you know? And so we're just trying to play that balance. Yeah, you bet anytime I'm like in a new in like a new city, or I'm like traveling anywhere and I look at the skyline of a city or cool buildings, you bet I'm like thinking about stuff like this all the time. Alright, so here's a fun little part, taking that detailed element that was on the side of the building there and just rotating it, putting on the ground, you know, flattening, stretching it, adding it to give more complexity. And sometimes when we see these shapes, just because it's oriented on the ground, now we see it as something else all of a sudden. Like we see it as a platform or a, you know, something else, right? So it's really cool. You can utilize the same shapes a lot of the time, but just because the orientation changes, we believe it's something else, right? So next time you're out there, go and see in nature, go and see in real life. Where do you see similar shapes and other things that are similar, but just because they're orientated differently, it's something else, you know? Can you guys think of any? They're out there. All right, this building's getting pretty close. Okay, so I'm liking the overall direction. Now that I have this building in a position where I feel like it's okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just put another building in the background. You know, again, copy, merge, paste. And again, this is just kind of quick conceptualizing. So it's just the idea of, hey, you know, there's an environment with this industrial building. Maybe there's a couple more in the background. Let's just see what we can do here. I'm cutting apart this building right now because at that distance, you're gonna get a different level of convergence and perspective. So I'm just doing a little tweaking here so it doesn't feel like it's so has too much convergence on it. Pretty straightforward. Whenever I'm designing stuff like this, I just think about maybe repeating a shape 2 or 3 times. You know, even adding in, you know, some nice overlaps and separation through the planes, through the foreground, middle ground, background. And so over here, I'm just like messing around with, well, what kind of visual interest can I add? You know, is there like more towers? Are there like spaceports? And here's where I'm like, this is kind of interesting. Maybe there's like a really, really big tower. Like a really big tower back there. And let me just duplicate it again. I'll add it on top. And we'll just make it feel like it's almost going into the clouds. Another building. What a quick way to just make a, you know, populate something up. And this is cool because what's nice about this, honestly, is that you can do this with people, cars, trees, mountains. You know, the whole idea is just to kind of do it once and make it pretty nice and clean. And the more I zoom into it, you're going to see that there's a lot of loose information. And again, quick concepts. You know, we're not trying to do a painting that takes days. This is really just a speed painting. Now the time has come to start thinking about atmosphere, lighting, separation, tone. So here we are. Let's work on the sky. Now the sky initially was just a photo, so I want to start adding in my controlled elements, which is, you know, just kind of controlling the areas of rest, the areas of detail. You know, personally, I love painterly edges, like really soft edges that are next to like a harder edge. So that's kind of what I like to do here. I'm trying to actually pre-plan some of that, you know? So I'm trying to designate or figure out where are the hard edges that I really want to pronounce the most, okay? I'm also doing something here that is pretty important for designers. It's like an idea of counterbalancing, which is, you know, the buildings are vertical, but I'm painting in clouds that are horizontal. So these shapes sort of interact with each other, and hopefully that horizontal shape pushes the vertical shape forward. All right, let's go to my good old cloud silhouettes. Boom. Cloud shapes. Might have seen in a previous one, I did a fantasy, was it like a fantasy mountain? And I used a very similar process when doing the sky. I'm just adding in clouds. You know, and the thing is with clouds in the sky is the sky has as much perspective as the ground plane does. So, but we just don't really pay attention to it as much because there's not a lot of rigidity and like parallel lines all the time. But if we could somehow design the sky that it does, what if we design the sky where there's clouds that feel like they're streaking along the sky plane and you see a lot of perspective? So, you know, we try to use any trick that we can to maximize our effect. You know, as a concept designer, we don't always have a luxury, you know, all these effects that could sell the visual. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We have very limited visuals to sell the idea. So we can take what we can get and we try to really maximize. Let me know if talking about some industry, how it works in studios, if that's kind of something that's interesting. Can definitely talk more about that stuff. But here we go. Sky is looking pretty good so far. And once the sky is at a good spot, and if you notice to the right, my layering, I've collapsed all the layers down so that it's just simple. Sky, ground, buildings 1, 2, 3, tower. And I flattened it down because it's a duplicate file. I have the fully layered one, you know, over back somewhere behind there. Alright, now we got the sky. The sky's done, so now we know how to sample distance and atmosphere. And we know where to place the atmosphere, how much of it we should be using, and we're now just judging all the visuals based on how it looks like in front of the sky. So I'm starting from the back, working my way forward. Most of the time utilizing either a lighten layer or just a normal layer. And I'm using a very soft airbrush. And you can see how big the brush is in comparison to the painting. Like it's a pretty big brush. Right, because I'm just trying to get these subtle washes. Keeping in mind which edge is more important. You know, if I put a little bit darker on the left, the right edge becomes more visible. So it's these little tricks, I guess, not tricks even, they're just techniques of how to do edge control. Building on the right. Now I'm thinking about, well, if I do it the same way, I mean, that's fine, but it feels kind of boring, a little repetitive. So I'm doing something where maybe like there's a shadow on the top of one, you know, it just kind of crests a little bit darker. Right, so spot the design contrast. Dark versus light, big versus small. 1, 2, 3. Big, medium, small. I think I already just said that. How about, you know, soft edge versus hard edge? How about simple versus complex? So there's things that we're all utilizing, you know? These are the tricks that we want to use all the time. Not just in this painting. Every painting that we work on, every design. Now we're gonna have some light hitting the ground. Oh yes. Some of that light traveling through the clouds. A little bit of dappled, kind of soft light. I'm sure we've all seen or have been in a scenario like this. You know, maybe a shadow from the building on the ground right there. A little bit of additional light from the other side. And here's where maybe we're getting a little bit of light on the surface of this building. A little marquee tool, a little square to control that hard edge. Okay. All right. So sort of the basic elements are laid in. You know, we have our silhouettes done. Pretty effective way to do those. Then jump directly into populating some of the silhouettes and shapes with some texture, getting the ground, the main building. Then we started to move around that finished building into different spots, making a composition. Then sky. The sky was really important because we had to basically finish it so that we can understand the tone and lighting subtleties. So after the sky is done, then it's all about controlling atmosphere. You know, atmosphere, also atmospheric perspective. Those elements are so crucial to making these feel believable, making things feel like there's space and distance in between. All right, so time to get some signs of life. What does that mean? Well, can we show activity? Can we show that there's movement and life in this space? Well, here we go. I'm gonna go ahead and take some lights that are in this photo that I have, and these lights are, you know, these tiny city lights. But if we're able to design them in a way that really fit the composition and the design of what we're working on here, then that can be really fun. So I'm just gonna scatter it all over here, see what I kind of like. Do I like lights up at the top? Do I like them more at the bottom? And now that I've kind of figured out, I think I know where I want them, I'm just gonna go ahead and paint them back in, you know? I pretty much think that the lights right now are like icing on the cake. It is definitely there for decoration, you know, for visual appeal. So, you know, my suggestion whenever doing this, it's very important to do it accurately. You know, do them accurately. I think I'm using lighten layer, I believe, or screen, but what's important to remember is that we're just trying to get the lights to sit on top of the darks. Just moving around, again, some more lights. Once I kind of have a pattern that I like to duplicate it a lot. Just like the walls, just like the texture of the walls, just like duplicating the buildings. There's a tendency for me to design something that I like and then repeat it multiple times in the piece, but moving it and turning it and changing the scale so that it still feels organic. Remember, in a real city, it's pretty much all the same lights that are in the city, you know, close to you, and the same lights in the same city that are far away from you. So that's kind of the idea. You can use the same lights almost everywhere, and hopefully I have a good pattern that's on the main building, so I can just duplicate that all over the place again. A little bit of final atmosphere. Let's get a couple more lights in there. and pop a little bit more visual interest, and I think we might be close to wrapping it up. Now, how big is this actual building and scale, everything? We don't know. It's big, you know. It's a little mysterious, but it definitely is epic. So that's the thing, is within this concept art it's really just to get ideas flowing, you know. Maybe on another painting we can size things down, size things up, but it's important to just remember that in this creation we're gonna just keep making more, and that's part of the visual appeal about this, is that we can make one painting and start to create more. And so I'm just gonna wrap this up here, but I have some more paintings that I would love to show you guys, and here are the different variations that were made by using this same painting. I was using the same elements, but moving them around, cropping in, adding in more overlaps, even changing the color palette, and this is what we're getting. So check it out. Thanks for joining. You know, join me on social media, and you know, drop me a like and subscribe, and you know, I'll be doing more of these, so I'll catch you on the next one. Take care, guys. Thanks.